It's China's world. We just pay for it. They're buying up the Commonwealth island by island. They're buying up the natural resources of entire continents. So it's no surprise they're extending their Belt and Road initiative to the very heavens. The other day, a Chinese fighter jet intercepted a Royal Australian Air Force plane over the South China Sea, forcing the Aussie pilot to take evasive action. Meanwhile, across the planet, other Chinese fighter jets have been buzzing planes of the Royal Canadian Air Force and diverting them from their flight paths. Australia's new PM, President-in-waiting Albanese, and Canada's longtime blackface mammy singing Prime Minister Jacinda Trudeau have condemned these provocations, but being swatted by a third-rate mammy singer doesn't seem to bother Chairman Xi. Alexandra Marshall from The Spectator Down Under joins me. What do you make of this, Alexandra?
Well, we've got a brand new Prime Minister, and he's a Labor Prime Minister, and our new Defence Minister is famous for taking trips on the Chinese dollar. So no doubt Beijing and Xi Jinping have decided to test Australia just to see how strong we really are going to be pushing back on the whole Taiwan issue. And so what do we have? We have warplanes coming in and buzzing our RAAF jets straight away. And this comes only a short time after we had Taiwan's biggest incursion, where China flew a whole stack of planes into Taiwanese airspace looking for a conflict or an accident. And this whole thing is about making the South China Sea so dangerous for Western aircraft that the West just doesn't fly anything in there. And so without aircraft in the South China Sea, China can continue its little program of militarizing coral atolls and creating little bases off its Asian friends. And so that's what this is really about. And the question is, will Labor, who's China-friendly, actually stand strong against this kind of military incursion?
Well, Labor has had the opportunity to be China-friendly for about a fortnight or whatever it is now, because they're a new government. In Ottawa, Justin Trudeau's been friendly to the Chinese. I forget what the exact way. He said he admired their basic dictatorship. He's actually been super cozy to them for the best part of a decade, and the RCAF still get buzzed by these Chinese planes. Do you think the Chinese are actually hoping just to drive Western air forces out of the skies? That's the basic plan, so people say it's not worth the agony, let's just stand down?
Well, they do exactly the same thing with the shipping lanes. They try and create these close calls because the West is absolutely terrified of ending up in an accidental situation where something goes wrong and shots are fired that shouldn't be, and you sort of wander or stumble into World War III. That's what they're terrified of. So China manufactures all these incidents to make the rest paranoid, basically. They're trying to get them to just leave entirely because they're hoping that the West is more afraid of a war than it is of policing the territory of these what are supposed to be international waters and international airspaces. So, yes, it is about trying to gain control without really deserving it.
Yeah, because just to follow up on what you were saying, clearly if an Australian or Canadian plane was downed, even the squishiest governments would feel they were obliged to react to that somehow. And yet the one thing Chairman Xi knows about Canberra and Ottawa is that those guys don't want to have to react at all.
Yeah, well, the thing is that plane incident we had with Australia, the Chinese jet actually released flares, which showered the aircraft in pieces of aluminium. Now, that can down an aircraft if it goes wrong. And so then the Australian Air Force is in a really difficult position because if China downs an aircraft, you should retaliate. But can you retaliate against a communist empire that is actually wanting a war there in the Pacific so they can take Taiwan? And if Australia doesn't react, well, then the West is put in a weakened position against China generally. So it's a really tricky situation that the West wants to avoid, and China is deliberately trying to make happen. So yes, you're totally right.
There is supposedly a thing called the AUKUS alliance. I don't suppose Mr. Albanese regards it as a very real thing. That's Washington, London and Canberra. Is there any expectation that Joe Biden, as the so-called leader of the free world, would demand an end to these provocations?
Well, Australia was basically told they had to sign up to this agreement because we were not doing enough on defence and we were becoming the weak link in the Pacific. So as much as the Labor Party's followers and supporters don't seem to like AUKUS, and particularly the Greens, who now make up a really scary amount of our parliament, they don't want AUKUS. I think that Labor has, at least after its defence briefings, realised that they require AUKUS to survive because things are far more serious than they realise in the Pacific. And I think that's going to strengthen, even though Labor doesn't like the idea of collaborating with the US. I think it's dawned on them they've got no choice in this matter because things are really quite bad. And we've seen total 180 from our foreign minister. Penny Wong's gone from, oh, we can sort of hug it out with China to, oh, maybe we can't. Maybe that doesn't work with communist dictators.
That's true. Well, that's an encouraging thought that they've had the briefing, so they got a little less idiotic about this stuff. Thank you very much, Alexandra. It's always great to see you.